Hey, what's up, Darktable photographers? In this video tutorial, we're going to be editing this astrophotography raw file that one of my viewers sent me and needed help editing. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you a quick and dirty way of editing this photo without too many adjustments. And then we'll take a look at a longer way with a deeper focus on what to look for when you're editing a astrophotography image in Darktable. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the tone curve. So I'll just type in tone curve here and then I'll select it, or it's already selected. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mask. So I'm going to click on this drawn mask icon and then I'm going to click on the elliptical mask icon here. And now I have the elliptical mask icon or overlay on the screen. So I'm just going to click and drop it into an area. Now I can change or adjust the size of this mask by clicking on the inner node, and then I can use the outer node or the outer circle or ellipsis to adjust the feather. And I'm just going to change it like that and just make it a little bit bigger. And you can also use your scroll wheel to adjust the size of elliptical mask, or shift plus the scroll wheel to change the feathering. But anyways, I'm just going to make it a big mask here. And if you want to rotate the elliptical mask, you can Control or Alt click on the node and then you can rotate it just like that. And let me see here. I'm going to make it to my liking. Maybe just like that. Okay, so I have this mask selected and I'll show you the mask overlay or the color grid. So this is where the mask is going to be applied. So I'm going to click or uncheck this and I can hide the overlay or this outline by clicking on this icon right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to decrease the shadows a little bit and then increase the highlights, and then I'm going to increase it a little bit more in the mid-tones just like that, and bring in the dark areas a little bit better. So let's take a look at the before and after. So this image is already looking pretty good, just like that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the color section here, and then I'm going to click on color balance RGB. I'm going to go down to this drawn mask area again. Then I'm going to click on this drawn mask drop down. It says no mask used. I'm going to click here and then I'm going to use the same shape as the tone curve. So it is the same mask, and I'm going to put on the overlay or the area where it's being impacted just to make sure it's being applied to the correct area. So I'll hide the mask and the overlay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some global saturation right here. Just increase it, increase the brilliance a little bit. That looks pretty good. And now what we can do is start playing with the hue here, and then we can change it around. And just like that, this image looks a lot better. And then I can change it to a different hue. I can also make it look unnatural. But let me see what I like here. And the good thing about changing the hue in the center only here is it gives a little bit of a color type of contrast, and it's different from the colors here. So that looks pretty good, or makes the image look pretty good. And I think I'm going to increase the highlight and the mid-tone saturation or the brilliance a little bit, and then the mid-tone and highlight saturation just like that. Actually, I might need to tone down brilliance. I think I like the way it looks now. So let's take a look at the before and after. I'll disable the tone curve here. So this is with the tone curve. And let me get back this color balance RGB, and this is with the color balance RGB. And let's disable the tone curve only. So this is with the color balance RGB and then with the tone curve. And of course you can make adjustments to your liking. And this is the quick way of editing a Milky Way photo. So what do you guys think? So anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset this image and we're going to take a look at a more practical or deeper look into editing this photo. The first thing I want to do is take a look at this image and take a look at the noise here. So we can see it has quite a bit of noise. Let me zoom in a little bit more. So we can see the noise here. If I go to image information, this photo was shot at 5000 ISO, but more importantly, the exposure time was 25 seconds. With this RP camera, the Canon RP, the 5000 ISO is not the problem. It looks like the exposure time is what's bringing in a lot more noise. However, these high-end or the newer full frame cameras, I think the RP is a full frame camera, they can handle noise pretty good. So I wouldn't mind cranking this ISO up to 10,000 and decreasing the exposure time to, let's say, around 13 seconds. And the reason being is if I zoom in a little bit more, you can start seeing the star trails right here. So the star is moving, of course. So instead of a perfect circle, the exposure time at 25 seconds kind of like increased the size of this star and most of the stars. So usually I would just increase the ISO a lot more to around 10,000 and decrease the exposure time, and then you could edit the photo and improve and reduce the noise in whatever photography software you have. In this case, it's Darktable. However, Darktable, it is limited in its editing capabilities, as we'll find out. But anyways, I'm gonna zoom out here to about 400%. And I'm just going to zoom in or focus in on this area because we have the shadows here and then we have the stars here. So this is a good area to do some noise reduction. So I'm gonna go to the correct section here. I'm gonna click on the denoise profile. So already the noise has been reduced and it already automatically selects a profile. So I think it selects the RP 5000, which should be fine, because if I select the RP 5000, nothing really happens. So it looks like Darktable automatically applies the correct one without making major adjustments to the noise reduction or the denoise. So just to show you that, let me go back to this found match for ISO 5000 and let me show you the before and after. Let me zoom into 800%. So this is the before and after. So I did a pretty good job with the noise reduction of the color or the chroma noise right here. I'll show you the before and after. So here's the before, here's some of the color noise as well as the color noise in the shadows. And this is the after. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this Astrophoto denoise, kind of add a double noise reduction. So this is the before and after. So it makes the image look a lot better. And you may or may want to do this. I'm just going to apply this lens correction. And you can see the shadows or vignette is gone in the corners and a little bit of the perspective or the warp has been corrected. So here's the before and after. So that's up to you if you want to apply lens correction to this image or to any astrophotography image. The other thing is maybe I want to sharpen it, but I don't think I'll sharpen the photo. I think it's good enough. I really want to focus in on this high density area of the Milky Way, which most people focus in on when they're editing a photo. And before we go further, I do want to show you a little bit more information on this photo in terms of the noise. Let me go to 400% or maybe 200. So you can still see some noise here at 200%. And I'm going to go to the exposure here and I'm just going to crank it up to overcook this image, and now you can see a lot of the noise. So in other photography software, the noise reduction is a lot better, or when it renders the initial image and then displays the preview, you can usually see less noise. So the viewer that sent me this photo, she was comparing it to a photo that was edited in Photoshop, the same image, but edited in Photoshop and Lightroom. The saturation or the shadows were increased in exposure, but I don't really want to do that too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset this here, and then I'm going to right click here on this image, or right click on the duplicate icon, and this should be a new instance. So let me double check. Yeah, so this is a new instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to control click here, control or alt click, and rename it Foreground Shadows, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is increase the exposure to about that. And then I'm going to click on the drawn and parametric mask. I'm going to display the yellow overlay here. And then I'm going to go to, let me take a look at this blue channel. So I'm going to click on the blue channel. I'm going to hide this overlay. So I'm looking at the blue channel here, and I'm going to press the keyboard shortcut C to view the blue channel, which shows a pretty good contrast between the foreground and the sky. I can go to this luminance here, and let me see the contrast. No, so I think the blue channel looks better, and I'm going to show the overlay, the yellow overlay. And I'm going to try to select the foreground here. So this slider here, it works kind of like the levels tool, and it helps adjust the tonal range using a histogram. However, if you don't know how the slider works, just search on my YouTube channel levels or tone curve, and then you'll see different tutorials for different photography software of how these like levels or these sliders work. But pretty much I'm just mapping the input and the output of the black point and the white point of this blue channel, or this luminosity mask, as you can also call it. So let me see if I can get a good selection here. I think if I map and select the sky, it's a little bit easier. Let me double check this. I think that looks good. And then I can click on this plus icon to change the polarity. Let me double check this. It's not always easy getting a good selection. I think that looks pretty decent for now. And the next thing I'm going to do is I need to get this part out of the way, like the bright stars or the bright highlights here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on, let me see here, there should be a masking right here. I'm going to add a path mask. So I'm going to click on this path, and then I'm going to click here, 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 click here, click there, and then I'm going to right click to finish this mask. Now what I need to do is select the correct range to only select this foreground here. So what I can do is try changing the entire polarity, but I think clicking here, nope, that's not it. I think maybe inclusive, no, these parts I always have to play around with it. Invert it and then change the polarity, and then I can change the size of the mask here. So change the polarity of that. No, that doesn't work. So I always get confused with the combined masks and changing the polarity. So let me just play with this a little bit more. Usually exclusive works correctly. And I need to click on the polarity of the entire mask. I think what I can do is change the point here, and then I can select it a little bit better. I am still selecting these stars at the bottom, but for now this works. It's selecting this foreground. So I'm going to click on hide this overlay and the path. And now I can increase this exposure without affecting the highlights of the sky too much. So I'm just going to subtly increase this. And I think that's good for now because I don't want to show too much of the noise. One thing I can do is I can add a similar mask and blur this area. Let me see if I can try to show that to you quick. I'm going to click on blur, click on blurs here. I'm going to increase the blur radius. I'm going to click on drawn mask and parametric. And the one issue with selecting a mask when you have like a parametric mask or when you're using the luminosity masking, using these ranges, you usually cannot select the same area. See, it's only selecting the sky, but it's not selecting this area. So let me just reset this here, increase the blur just to give me a preview. I'll go to the parametric masking, and there's different ways to mask the foreground with these combinations of these drawn masks or the vector mask, the parametric masking. But I can try doing this way, the other way, like that. And let me see here. This time I could draw like a elliptical or ellipsis, just like that. Increase the size. And let me adjust the polarity. And it could be better I rotate this guy, rotate the mask. Just like that. Now I'll hide the mask, hide the vector. So I'm gonna keep the blur radius at around 22. So I'm blurring the foreground here. Let me X that, go back to the exposure. So I'm going to actually control click here and put blur, or no, I'll just type in foreground. Type that in and go back to the foreground shadows. And then I can increase this exposure a little bit more without showing too much noticeable noise on the foreground. So anyways, the focus is on the background. So I think we'll just keep it at that for now. You can see some artifacting or some noise coming in the bottom left corner and this blown out highlight right here. But one thing we can do is just decrease the exposure using some masking. In the photo that the viewer sent me, this area or this left quadrant was cropped out. So that's one thing we can do. Keep in mind, like Photoshop and Lightroom, it is a powerhouse, so it's very difficult to replicate the exact thing in Darktable. It'll just take a very long time unless you have a certain process. What I'll do is I will just decrease the exposure a little bit more and keep it like that. So now we can start focusing in on this Milky Way area here. So what I think I'm going to do is go to the color section. And actually, before I do that, I want to show you something. I'm going to zoom in here and we can see on these stars, and I think it's due to the rendering. Some of it is purple. You can see some blue, some green. So we need to be careful when we're increasing the saturation of this image. And you'll see that it's very difficult to increase the saturation without adjusting these. Like these kind of should be white, I guess. And this could be an issue with the raw rendering of this file. And that's one of the reasons some of the other image editors are better. Of course, this is free, so that's why we're using it. But a lot of these stars have different colors. Even if I go to the correction section here and click on this raw chromatic aberration, it makes subtle change to these stars. Usually you don't use raw chromatic aberrations, at least I don't do a reduction in chromatic aberrations in astrophotography. Usually the raw file is clean enough that you don't need to do it. You can see here, avoid color shifts barely does nothing. It's negligible. So I'll just leave that off. But anyways, yeah, so we need to be careful of the coloring or changing the colors of the stars. Otherwise, it'll just start looking weird when there's like a high cluster of stars in an area. So one thing I can do is to avoid that problem is I'll go to the color section here. I'll go to color balance RGB. I'll go back to this parametric mask there. I will display the mask and then I will try to get the stars. Let me see here. I think that's good enough. So if I zoom in here, it's okay if I have this area selected, not a big deal, but if I zoom in here, I should be selecting these stars here. It's a little bit hard to see zoomed in, but what I can do is let me hide the mask overlay, and you can see there's an issue with Darktable. So if I decrease the global saturation, this should be decreased. So I use the perceptual saturation. Let me decrease the brilliance. So not too much is happening. And decrease the global chroma, or even if I focus in on the highlights, not too much is happening. Let's see the before and after. Before and after. So I don't notice too much of a change in trying to decrease the colors of the stars. Let's focus in on this one. It looks pretty good there. Before and after, no. So I need to double check this mask here. So I'll go back to this parametric masking. It was on the luminosity mask section here, the JZ. And let me show you the overlay. And let me turn off, make sure the channel mask is off. Let me go to fit. So just by eyeballing it, like it looks like it's selecting the stars here. It's just hard to see when it's zoomed in. So let me try to change the range a little bit. Because I can see yellow on these stars, but it's not that great when I zoom in. So you can see for a few seconds like the yellow dots there. So I guess it doesn't show you a preview of the color overlay. So I have to take Darktable at its word that it's selecting the highlights or the stars. And let me zoom back in to about 400%, hide this mask. So now we have the color. So let's take a look at this purple one here. I'll go to 1600. And I think what I'm going to do is show you the before and after. Before and after. Yeah, so this mask isn't targeting the highlights very well unless the preview is not that good. So let me go back to the outer view, and I'm hoping these stars are white. Like the color I see is white, and it's just a bad preview that I'm seeing. But just keep that in mind when you're editing an astrophotography image, that you don't color shift the parts that should be white or the white stars. And now let's start doing or focusing in on the middle here. So I'm gonna click on this icon here. It says right click to create a new instance. So that's what I'll do. I'll create a new color balance. So let me just rename this, and I'll just put it as desaturate stars, even if it's not working properly. And then I'm going to right click on the new instance of the color balance RGB, and I'll put this, I'll control or I'll click on this, and then I will put Milky Way. And similar to the quick and dirty way of editing, where we created a tonal curve here or mask, I'm going to do the same thing. And it looks like I messed up something here. So let's go to color balance RGB. Yeah, so this color balance RGB is affecting this. And let me turn this back on, or turn it back on there. Go to exposure and go to the exposure of the foreground shadows and decrease it a little bit. Let's take a look at it now. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is not increase the exposure too much of this, and then uncheck this desaturate stars, because I don't want to play around too much with this masking here. So I think I'll just keep it like that. And then what was I doing? I was trying to select this, right? So yeah, right here, this color balance RGB. I'm going to select this area here. So the way I can do that is go to the drawn mask and parametric mask here. And let me see this channel. So that looks good. Let me show you the overlay. Let me try to get the foreground. I think I have to change the polarity. And this isn't black and white, so I have to press the letter C to show you this. It's the mask on. Let me show it to you. I clicked on the drawn mask, so that was the problem. I need to click on the parametric mask masking. Okay, so I got this foreground selected. Now what I need to do is put in a elliptical mask or ellipsis mask. And I'm going to rotate it by clicking on the node and pressing Control or Alt. And let's make this feather bigger. I think that looks good. Now I always mess up with the polarity of everything, so let me double check these. Inclusive, these mutually exclusive words, I usually learned it in in economics, but I always forget when I'm using it with vectors and masking. So let me see here. Okay, so now I have it selected. Just about that. It looks like it's not selecting the stars as well because of the parametric mask, but that's okay. So let me hide the overlay. And now what I can do is I can increase global saturation, the perceptual saturation. I'll just crank it up to 100%. And let me show you the before and after. And this global brilliance will bring in some brightness to the center. And I have to be careful of not going overboard. And I'll increase the mid-tone and the highlight brilliance. So now this image is looking a little bit better. I can increase global vibrance to bring in more vibrance to this area. And then what I can do is shift the hue a little bit. So the hue will change from the surrounding area. So that looks good. And I'm going to zoom in to about 200%. So just due to the mask, I can already see a little bit of artifacting going on. I'm not too sure if you guys can see it on your screen. You can see these black dots here. So what I'm going to do is go to fit. And I'm going to go back to this mask here. And let me double check the exclusive. Invert this, invert that. So I don't like any of these. So what I can do probably is I can increase the feather radius to about that. Increase the blur radius to remove some of the artifacting with the mask going on. So I think I'll just keep it at that. So we got rid of those like dots here that are making the masking throw off the saturation. So let me hide the overlay. That looks a little bit better. And I'll go back to this hue shift here. So that looks pretty good. The other thing I can do is bring in the tone curve again. And now you can see the color issue I was talking about. So let me go to this corner here. You can see all this blue coming in. Like these should be white. And it'll take me forever in this tutorial to mask those out and correct the mask. Hopefully this is just a bad preview. But yeah, so this is something like most other paid photography software is easily avoidable. You can see like this blue hue. And let me just change it around. Decrease the global vibrance. That improved it a little bit. But anyways, let me go back to the tone curve. And let me add in a mask here. I will put in, let me see if I can get a shape. They use the same shape as path 1. No, that wasn't it. Ellipsis 2. Ellipsis 3. So let me right click on this, right click on that, and just keep this in here. That looks good. Now I can decrease the shadows and increase the highlights. and then increase the midtones a little bit. Let me hide this overlay. So this is starting to look good. So let me see the before and after with the tone curve. So the tone curve, like this section is the highlights, this section is shadows, and the middle is the midtones. So I'm just mapping or changing the luminosity or the tonal range of this center area. And another thing we can kind of like do is, let me just rename this. I'll just type in Milky Way contrast. Another thing we can kind of do is start playing around with the colors a little bit more on the outside. So I will go back here. I will right click for a new instance. I will rename this, and then I will rename it bottom left. And let me change the hue to about that. And then I can increase the global vibrance and global saturation. So I have the bottom left, and now I'm going to draw in a gradient mask, a linear gradient. Where is it? Let me click on this. And so I'm going to click on the gradient mask here. I'm going to place a gradient mask here, rotate it, and then I'm going to decrease the feathering. So I have to click on shift, and then hold the shift button, and then use the scroll wheel to change the feathering. That looks good, and it's impacting the reverse way that I don't want. So what I can do is click on the polarity of this mask. So I can click on this, and it looks like that worked. And let me change feathering a little bit, just like that. And I think I'll keep it around there. Decrease the feather a lot more. So this is a different way of color grading your images, just by using different masks. And now what I'm going to do is right click here. I'll click on here. I'll put top right. And then I'm going to have to create another mask. I'll click on drawn mask. I'll click on the mask that I already used for use same shape as this one, right? Group color balance RGB. So I have it selected. I can just rotate it like that. So it looks like we lost our color here, and now it's being impacted there. So let me Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, just like that. And let me go to this no mask used, use the same shape as color balance RGB. No, that's the wrong one. I will Control Z that. Bottom left. Okay, so now I have it selected. Okay, so now I still have this color, but it's removing this. So let me see where this mask is being applied. And let me change the hue of this. Okay, so the hue is changing. So let me increase the saturation and the vibrance and put it somewhere like here. And I'll decrease the size of the gradient feathering, put it like there maybe. Let me see and hide this vector. So this is a different way of color grading, again using these gradient masks. I don't really like this purplish color or this magenta color, so I can go back to the bottom left one, change the hue to make it more aligned, just like that. And then another thing we can do is start like putting in patches or blobs of different exposure or color. So to demonstrate that, I'll just type in tone curve again. I'll right click on this and then I'll change the name to blob. And then I'm going to draw a mask here. I'm going to click on drawn mask. I'm going to click on this brush icon. And I'm going to change the feather to about that and then increase the size. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to control click on this. So once I click on it, I'll still have the brush available. And let me show you the brush. So it's impacting those areas there. And then what I can do is I can just like play around and change the exposure of those areas, just like that. And it gives in a little bit more focus, but you do need to be careful if the feathering is not good. Let me increase the feather radius and the blur radius. And just like that. So let me show you the before and after of this tone curve. So these blobs, it helps add more detail or focus into certain areas of the Milky Way. Let me try to see if I can hide this overlay. Okay, so I hit it. So this image looks pretty interesting. Of course, there's more cleanup adjustments we can do. Let me hide the overlay of the mask. So it looks like it is hidden. I do see some color artifacting coming in due to the stars being colored incorrectly. This is an issue with the rendering of the Darktable. If I am incorrect, make sure to leave a comment below. The other thing I can do is spend a lot more time correcting these masks or these stars while I'm editing, but this editing will just take too long, or this video tutorial will take too long. But pretty much when you're editing astrophotography, you want to reduce the noise, maybe sharpen some of the stars, and then start masking the Milky Way and adding contrast to it, as well as shifting some of the colors. And if you guys enjoyed this video tutorial, you know what to do. And if you guys have better ways of editing a astrophotography image in Darktable or have examples of your photos, make sure to leave it in the comments. And as always, live easy, sleep breezy, and stay lovely.